Welcome, everyone, to Grazing Horizons. This is AgriProve's Pod and R series, part podcast, part webinar, all signal, no noise. My name is Matthew Warnken, founder and chair of AgriProve. Today, I will be hosting as we tackle the big questions in Australian agriculture. At Grazing Horizons, we are interested in looking at farming and grazing through the lens of soil strength, not as an abstract philosophical concept, but as practical management tools that can materially improve long-term sustainability, lift productivity, and ultimately drive profitability for producers. We're broadcasting today from the AgriProve soundstage in Albury on Wiradjuri country. I'd like to call out and pay our respects to all First Nations people, recognizing their role as the original innovators in agricultural systems, where by necessity, ecology was integrated as a foundation of the day-to-day economy. And certainly at Grazing Horizons, we want to focus on those ecological insights for better management to make progress in sustainability, productivity, and importantly, profitability. Now, this episode, we are mixing things up. Hobbs Magaret is back, 7th generation Texan rancher, musician, prolific social media content creator, master of ecological adaptive grazing, author, raconteur extraordinaire, and now grazier in residence at AgriProve. And Hobbs, I don't know about you, but this is starting to feel more like a co-hosting gig rather than like you're joining as a guest. How's that strike you? You want to jump into the co-host role?
Yeah, I think so. If we could just get somebody else on this particular podcast today, that'd be a great way to start that.
So, spoiler alert, we are joined today by special guest, Cadel Watson, AgriProve's head of technology, who is going to report back on the AgriProve challenge we set out last episode, digitizing soil organic nitrogen. Now, this is especially topical given the out-of-control prices on fertilizer. And what I didn't really realize at that time was that no one had ever done this before in terms of digitizing soil organic nitrogen. Before we get on to Cadel, Hobbs, great to have you back in the studio for Grazing Horizons, mate. What's been happening in your world?
It actually reminds me when you say 7th generation rancher. I've been doing some genealogy lately.
Genealogy.
Just been checking back into.
We're not working you hard enough at AgriProve. Obviously, we've got time for genealogy.
Well, it turns out it's related because the thermodynamic decline, the energy decline of our landscape systems can be traced back through my family and witnessing it. So been looking at a lot of gravestones online. It's a great place to tell where people are from. So, go back into the family lineage, looking at things. Seeing how my great-great-grandfather was running the Ojo Bravo division of the XIT ranch in 1888 when it was still a functioning ecology, all the way to now when it's center pivots, monoculture, and dairy barns with 18,000 cows under one roof.
So, and no wolves.
And no wolves. No wolves left. No wolves.
Which, from an ecological perspective, is not that great.
No, it's not. It's sad, and it's like from a controlled environment. Obviously, we like to not have wolves in our backyards, but also it's on the planet-wide scale. It's kind of good to have wolves. It's kind of good. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Cadel Watson, any wolves in your backyard or in your past? And like, how many generations can you count back? Are you like a 7th generation technology specialist?
I think I'm the first in my family, actually, so no wolves in the past, but yeah, happy to be here nonetheless.
So tell us a bit about how long you've been at AgriProve. Tell us a bit about your role, what you're doing before, and then what are you finding exciting in terms of the technology development at AgriProve?
Yeah, sure. So I've been at AgriProve about a year and a half now. Previously, I was running a startup called Jura. So a bit of background there is that we're in a very similar space where we were focused on incentivizing good land management, like your run-of-the-mill basic land management that actually delivers results and is good for the environment too, which traditionally wasn't really highly valued. A bank would pay you for a big project or something flashy, but there kind of wasn't that reward for the day-to-day. So we were really focused on sustainability-linked loans. That was like interest rate reductions based on verifiable farm outcomes. And we built a lot of technology around predicting that and quantifying that. So we could see exactly what was going on in your farm at any time and the positive improvements you were making. But what we really didn't have was data, and what AgriProve had was lots of that. So it kind of came about a year and a half ago that the synergy of the two companies was going to be a really great fit, and so I ended up here. So I think that's, sorry, Matthew.
No, you go.
No, that's the really exciting thing for me is we kind of had some existing technology and then we supercharged that, and we're able to really verify based on all of AgriProve's carbon projects and all of the sampling that we've done exactly how well this technology works, and we really can see into the soil now, even without going out and digging it up.
Now, would I be right in characterizing your role, your day-to-day role at AgriProve in terms of operationalizing what we call our Schedule 2 model? Maybe just to unpack that a bit in terms of what is Schedule 2 and what does that, what's involved?
Yeah, for sure. So people who are familiar with the current soil carbon methodology will know that there's kind of two ways of getting credits for what you're doing on farm. The first, Schedule 1, is measurement based. Every time we want to try and issue credits, we go out and we take soil samples, we send them off to the lab, we test the results and see if you've managed to put more carbon into your soil.
That's the measure, remeasure.
Yeah, exactly. And that has been working really well, but it's expensive and it's hard to scale. What Schedule 2 lets you do is add in the technology and the model to the mix. So this lets you add in rounds which are fully modeled. So they're kind of predicted from afar. There's no need to actually drive out to the property. And you get this nice measure, model, remeasure approach. So you're essentially halving your costs for running the project. You don't have to pay for the sampling. And it allows us to move to a much more frequent crediting cycle. So rather than having to wait years between events, maybe every single year you can be generating ACCUs right from year one.
So you never leave any money on the table, basically.
Exactly. And it's free. It's free if you're not quite hitting the threshold to credit. You haven't kind of sunk that cost into sampling when it wasn't needed.
Now, this is a follow-on, and we should call out to the Australian government for their support to AgriProve and the National Soil Carbon Innovation Challenge, which we completed September last year. And we had what we're calling our Horizon version 1 or Horizon 1.0 soil carbon model. Now, where are we up to in terms of what version are we up to? How's performance looking like? What's the kind of time frame? When do we expect to see carbon credits actually coming out through that measure, model, measure approach or that Schedule 2 approach?
Yep, great question. So the first version of Horizon completed last year based on that NSCIC. Since then, we've done a lot of work on it. We've added 10,000 more samples. So that's more ground truth across all of our projects, diverse ecology, diverse geography, and diverse management practices. So for certain measurements, it's now improved 66%. So it's a lot more accurate. We're aiming for our first major Schedule 2 issuance in about the middle of this year. So that will be kind of the big proof point. From there, we can expect to see it rolling out across our whole portfolio.
And we got a performance boost in terms of adding that 10,000 samples. And then as we continually roll out and bring more projects into that Schedule 2 approach, do you expect that we will continue to get that improvement in accuracy and reduction in variance or reduction in that mean error?
Yeah, I do. Both for technical reasons and also just because AgriProve's portfolio is so varied, it means that kind of every time we get more information from a Schedule 2 round, it is applicable to all the other projects. And so the estimates get tighter and tighter, and therefore we can issue ACCUs with a lot more confidence.
Cadel, what's the big picture here? What is this going to enable for Australian farmers, for Australian farming in general?
I think Horizon was initially built with soil carbon in mind, so it had a very narrow focus. What we've kind of discovered is that all the data feeding into it is not restricted to soil carbon, and what it's really doing is building up a kind of model of land understanding. And I will demo some stuff about this in a little bit, but we're seeing it's applicable to soil nitrogen, it's applicable to pH, it's applicable to micronutrients. And what that means is essentially we can start to recommend practice changes based on everything we've seen in our portfolio in order to deliver the most credits and in order to improve the ecology of the farm.
Would you say it's right to characterize what this is a bit of a digital agronomist?
Digital agronomist is a great term for it, yeah. And it makes it really cheap to run those scenarios. You can run 10 different what-if simulations, see which one's the best, and we can issue a recommendation straight away.
So I think that becomes a breakthrough, obviously, in getting carbon credits issued more frequently, with greater certainty in terms of the statistical accuracy as to what we're delivering. But then that expanded digitizing of landscape function to enable those scenarios, I mean, like, that is hugely exciting. So then, Cadel, was it really fair that without any consultation of you, we set you this soil organic nitrogen challenge?
Look, I missed the Podnar, and I was watching it on YouTube a couple of days after it came out, and I did get a small fright at that. But we're used to that kind of thing at AgriProve.
Because it's I'm right in saying it's never been done before.
It's never been done to this extent. The sort of prediction of organic nitrogen is either really expensive field testing using isotopic measurements, which are very rare in Australia, or they're on the scale of hundreds of kilometers, which obviously is pretty much useless for farm management. So at this resolution, at this level of detail, yes, never been done before.
Excellent. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do a couple of slides from Hobbs's deck just to set the scene on nitrogen and why this is important in terms of, like, if you could get an indicator of how much nitrogen your soil as a superorganism was fixing in terms of that utility, and you could price that. How much of a breakthrough, how useful that would be. So let's jump in, and I'm saying, looking over at Hobbs and looking at our producer and realizing that, hey, Daniel, but realizing that it's all up to me. I just have to do the share piece. So just bear with the user error on the technology, and let's. Can I get a thumbs up, Daniel? And sorry, that's it's an in-house joke, Daniel. We wish you a speedy recovery from your footy injury. How many places did you? Oh, you broke your thumb into 6 pieces, and there we have the video reference. Thank you, Daniel. All right, Hobbs, over to you.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, the genesis of this entire conversation was around the Strait of Hormuz and
How to pronounce it? Iran, not
Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz, and then, so I mean, many thanks to the geopolitical strife that we're experiencing, so that we can push forward to uncover and move past the limiting factors that are exposed through these sort of events. So we're looking at the fuel crisis. We're looking at $1,600 a ton for urea. We're looking at, let's try and figure out what the heck is going on underneath all of this. And then you have to understand, first of all, like, okay, nitrogen, like, who cares? So what? Well, nitrogen is what protein is made out of, and protein is pretty much what drives the landscape. I mean, the number one thing people think about with grazing is protein. We got to get protein to the animals. You got to make sure they have plenty of protein. Energy is important. Fiber is important. Protein's probably the top dog. So you got to have nitrogen so you can get protein. And so then the question is, how do we get nitrogen? And ultimately, this just becomes a conversation about energy. It's an energy surplus conversation. So how do we get because what we've been doing so far is we discovered the Haber-Bosch process. Awesome. Let's take natural gas. Let's put a ton of energy into it. Let's crack those bonds and then make urea. And then suddenly you're adding a ton of extra energy above the result of energy, the derivative of energy above maintenance, to create growth so that we can harvest it and eat it and enjoy it. And that is obviously fossil fuel powered abundance. So Earth has spent 4 billion years trying to figure out how to create solar powered abundance. It's a pretty good system. And we figured out how to cheat the system for a very short period of time, and we're seeing some pretty brutal downstream effects of it. The most brutal downstream effect, I would say probably, is how non-resilient that system is, which is shown to us right now by the Strait of Hormuz in Iran. So that's I would say that's probably the fundamental issue that we're dealing with.
Yeah, big fertilizer shock.
Yeah.
And just on that number, $1,600 a ton of urea. Now, urea is not a ton of nitrogen, roughly 47, 48%, 46%. So at that calculation, at $1,600 a ton for urea, nitrogen costs $3,480 per ton of N. When, as this slide captures, we've got how much nitrogen above every hectare. Nitrogen actually not the limiting factor. There's tons of it available. It's just like, how do you get it into the soil?
Yeah, there are what is it? 7 tons above every square meter. There are 2.3 times 10 to the 27th nitrogen molecules. That's 2.3 billion nitrogen molecules hitting the surface of every square meter every second.
Yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about prices today, so I do have to read out the disclaimer that what we present on this Pod&R is not financial advice. Now, you should consult your own advisors before making any financial investment decisions. But this is all about farm economics, and there are some people feeling that pain, not only because of fertilizer costs, but also for diesel, which is a sign in terms of, well, where does the sovereignty of your system lie if what is happening in the Middle East is a circumstance far beyond Australian government control or intervention?
Well, the sovereignty lies in the White House right now. That's where the sovereignty appears to lie, and that's not where we want the Australians' farmers' sovereignty to be, I don't think.
No, absolutely not. So not financial advice, but at $3,480 a ton, that's $3.48 a kilo. Like every kilo we can fix from nitrogen is a kilo we don't need to buy. And that's financially important.
And synthetic nitrogen is responsible for half of the world's population right now. So by figuring out a way to make our farmers more profitable by fixing their own nitrogen biologically through the biological machinery in their soil, it's also going to help secure the life of billions of people. I mean, I don't want to get too altruistic about it. I certainly want to, focus on Australian farmers, making money, but at the same time, it's an important point that's touching a lot of elements.
Sure. A reminder that we are taking questions, so if you can hit that Q&A function, that's a place to post a question. What do we reckon? Just jump to Cadel's demo?
Oh, I will really want to see this demo.
So now I think I stop sharing, and Cadel, you're going to hijack the show.
Yeah, I'll kick you right off, Matthew. Let's do this.
I'll try to keep the oohing and awing to a minimum, but I have seen this already, and it is pretty cool.
Yeah, and so what we're looking is that proof of concept in terms of, can we digitize soil organic nitrogen?
Sorry, the answer to that, Matthew, is yes. I'm hoping you can see my screen now.
Yeah, we got it.
Great. So I thought I'd start just to kind of set the scenery of what is available so far in the AgriProve platform, and then show what's changed since you issued that challenge on the last episode. What we're seeing now is a real AgriProve project. This is a project which is credited. It is one of our successful projects, and we're viewing the horizon estimate for the soil organic carbon. So this is a kind of high resolution, almost live updating view of what's going on beneath the ground that doesn't require physical sampling. So we use this kind of information to both recommend management decisions and also to work out when to sample, the expected yield if we were to sample, and to kind of make that crediting process as smooth and efficient as possible. Where does this prediction come from? It comes from over 300 different predictive variables. That means that we're pulling climate information, we're pulling kind of long-term climate averages, we're pulling very recent data about recent rainfall events, for example. We're understanding the landscape, so we know where the erosion hotspots are. We know the steep areas and the valleys and the gullies. We know the soil type, we know the structure, we know how much clay is in the soil. And then we also have our kind of continuous layer of satellite imagery. So obviously it depends on clouds. Sometimes we get lucky, sometimes we don't, but that tends to update around every 2 to 3 days. So it can almost be live, this sort of information. As I said before, what we've kind of started to discover with Horizon is that it's applicable to a deeper understanding of the landscape beyond soil carbon. So the first challenge that you set last time was to reapply this model to predicting the soil organic nitrogen pool. I think we all know the refrain, you can't manage what you can't measure. So this is kind of the first step in managing for soil organic nitrogen.
Cadel, I have a
Switch
question
over.
real quick.
Jump in.
Sorry for jumping in. So we're saying soil organic nitrogen. Is it maybe soil biological nitrogen? Because you can add organic nitrogen through like chicken litter and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, this is organically bound. So yes, you could call it biological nitrogen.
Okay, organically bound. I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And
No, it's a
so
good distinction to make.
BNF.
BNF.
Yeah,
Biological nitrogen fixation.
As
Fixation.
opposed to
Yeah,
SON.
Okay.
that's right. So this is the map of kind of the outcome of that BNF process. This just shows you areas on your farm which are higher or lower in that biologically fixed nitrogen. This is kind of good for a general overview of potentially the hotspots to have a look at that might be lower than the rest of the farm. And in this image here, we've marked a couple of paddocks in orange, which probably need the most work, and then a couple in green, which are kind of your reference zones that are going really well, and you can copy practices from there. This is already interesting for management, but as you're kind of foreshadowing, Hobbs, the real kind of kicker is the BNF predictions. Now, if I switch to that tab, what we're seeing here is the rate of biological fixation. So this is how efficiently that kind of biological engine of your soil is converting nitrogen from the atmosphere into the ground and storing it long term. So here, the white areas are lower and the green areas are higher. And this ranges all the way from 5 kilograms of N per hectare per year up to around 75. These numbers are very variable across Australia. This is a cool climate farm, so the numbers will be lower, but you can kind of get an idea of how spatially variable that fixation rate is across the farm. And so therefore, all of the areas that you need to focus on here. Now, this is the bit that, yeah, go ahead, Hobbs.
In a cool environment, you could, what you're saying is that it is maybe more difficult to biologically fix nitrogen, but since cool environments have a slower sort of chemical processing capacity, you could potentially keep it around longer.
Correct. Yeah. And it's important to remember that temperature is a factor, but it's not the whole story. I'll talk a little bit about accelerators and brakes. The temperature or lower temperatures are a brake, but the accelerators available can really overpower that. So you can still sequester a lot. So this is the information here that was previously completely unavailable. So you could get this at a 100-kilometer radius, just for basically a regional level. Now we'll bring it down to 30 meters and soon to 10 meter squares. So you can apply really targeted interventions.
And 75 kilograms of N is around $260 worth of FERT. But interesting, just on that, just while we're doing the numbers, that'll be assuming in terms of what you apply to your pasture would be 100% picked up.
Yeah, exactly.
So there would be some efficiency loss. Now, if that efficiency loss is as much as 50%, then that value of that BNF, biological nitrogen fixation, is twice as important. So we're talking up over $500 a hectare equivalent. Significant.
And it's not just the initial efficiency; it's also the long-term permanence. So the different pathways sequester nitrogen in different kind of chemical pools, and some are more prone to mineralization and leaching than others. And BNF targets those pools which have the longest permanence. So over the long term, it's probably worth even more than that.
Oh, wow. Intelligence of life.
So one of the really cool things about this new Horizon model is we can start to understand exactly what influences BNF on the farm. So why don't I click into one of these paddocks here, and we'll see a full breakdown on the right. So the headline number here is the average yearly nitrogen sequestered through BNF on this paddock, which is at 47.5 kilograms per hectare. But we can get a lot more detail than that. So I know Hobbs spoke last podna about the different pathways for BNF. We have, in general, a split between symbiotic fixing, which comes from the use of legumes, and then we have a much smaller contribution from your background microbes in healthy soil. And so we can see that exact split here. This is our prediction from the Horizon model. 95% of this headline figure is being driven by the legumes which are planted in this paddock. So in this project, they're using mostly annual legumes, some peas and clover mixes, and we can see that impact here.
And now, do we know the collective noun for the nitrogen fixing microbiology?
I don't, Matthew. Do you know?
It's going to have trouble pronouncing it. Diazotroph.
Diazotroph.
Yeah, 2 nitrogen. So it's basically the ability of getting or cracking the triple bond of within nitrogen and making it plant available. Go on, I've got more here around the French chemist who discovered it and a whole bunch of stuff, but I'll stay in my lane. Sorry, Cadel, back to you.
Same for the Q&A.
Yeah.
I'll ask that question. So what we're seeing here is that the different influencing factors that Horizon has identified for BNF. We kind of split this into, as I said, accelerators and brakes. Some things are going to boost the system, and some things are going to pull them back and limit it. Of the accelerators, by far the most important is legume biomass. We know legumes fix nitrogen, and here the mixture here in the pasture is contributing pretty much all of it. So that's this kind of green bar here: dense legume cover, high biomass, high BNF. In terms of limiting factors or brakes, there's a few that we've started to identify. One, as we mentioned before, is soil temperature. So the nitrogenase enzyme, which is really important for this pathway, operates optimally at about 25 degrees. If you go above and below that on the long term, its effectiveness is limited. Not too much, it's not too bad, but it is a limiting factor there. If I just have a look at, say, these 2 paddocks here, I just want to illustrate that legume point. This one, we see a lot of green. We have a high legume cover. This one here is much lower, so white. And we can see that there's way fewer legumes in the mix here. So it's kind of sparse or non-existent. We can see that even though the symbiotic to free living split is still pretty much the same as the previous paddock, the overall BNF is so much lower. So that's really indicative of the mix in pasture.
So, Cadel, if I wanted to buy a farm in Australia, I would presumably lean heavily towards places that have an average soil temperature across the year of 25 degrees Celsius.
If you want to maximize BNF.
If you want to maximize BNF. What? Say that again, Cadel?
As close to it as possible. It's a sloped effect. So. Okay. But we should focus on what we can change, not necessarily soil temperature, which is fairly inviolable depending on where you are.
Cadel, and this is outstanding work. Like this, like in terms of response to seeing the challenge on YouTube and responding to it. I mean, I find this fascinating. This is a research proof of concept. What's your gut feel in terms of should we be focusing on the numbers or the relative proportion? So like the numbers of nitrogen fixed may change as we get more and more ground truthing to build that out. But do you think we're getting that split between legume contribution and the sort of free living microbial functionality right? Or how do you see this tool evolving as we can put more and more data into it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's based on a lot of research about the underlying processes. Soil is a complex system, as we all know. There are feedback loops, both positive and negative. There are limiting factors. There are cascades where things kind of run out of control. What that means is no matter how good you get the processes are, you do need the ground truth. So we're lucky in that in the past for some of our projects, we've done some really good quality, high density sampling in partnership with RMIT. That gives us a good base truth for end measurements. We've also pulled in as much of the literature data on BNF as possible. So that's kind of global. It's not as applicable to Australia, but it still gives us some signal. The next step is to refine the actual numbers, as you say. So we can kind of do targeted sampling, both regular and spectroscopic, put in some of the numbers and really fine tune these results. The overall process, though, is sound and it's directional.
So it's almost like we need to develop up a nitrogen pack to be offering like at our baseline sampling. So whereas if you wanted this kind of resolution to understand nitrogen cycling, there's a great opportunity when you're doing your soil carbon baseline to do your soil BNF baseline to get that understanding in terms of the functionality or utility of your soil.
Absolutely. Yep.
And we're talking significant numbers, especially at today's fertilizer prices.
Yeah, and this was for this farmer low year, right? This was a very dry year in 2025. If you go back to a much wetter year, 2024, you can see across the board much higher.
Yeah. So and doing that calibration gives you an opportunity to actually value the utility your soil strength is providing in across that nitrogen axis.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's the other interesting thing that we're discovering is it's that balance in terms of not just carbon, not just nitrogen. These are a whole raft of things that your management system, your program need to pick up and focus on. And as you said, Cadel, if you're not measuring it, it makes it super hard to manage.
Yep, exactly. So this is kind of the start. Obviously, we'll do a lot of the refinement work and ground truthing. But what was the most encouraging to me was how we were able to kind of pivot the existing Horizon model to this new application without much kind of fundamental architectural change. That bodes really well for the future. If we say want to look at acidity, which we know can be a big issue in carbon projects, or if we want to look at different kind of management strategies and dry matter based on different grazing strategies, all those sort of things, we can start to repurpose all of the ground truth that we've already collected for those new applications. So I'm really excited about that too.
Awesome. Well, I don't know. Do we think Cadel passed? That's it's pretty awesome stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, right now, here's my brain is going. What does the future look like when we have automated tractors, machinery that is basically spot treating synthetic nitrogen in the proper places to kick off the ideal amount of biological nitrogen fixation in a system that's coupled with managed grazing with cattle with GPS ear tags under a dome on Ganymede.
There we go. That's it. That's the sting in the tail. It's not just like in Broken Hill. It's like in Ganymede, one of the 4 Galilean moons of Jupiter. For those who are interested.
I mean, funny, yeah, but I mean the applications here are staggering.
I believe so. Quick question, Cadel, as you're doing the research and just to check in terms of, were there any emerging ceilings in terms of what could be a ceiling, like in terms of 300 kilograms of N? Is that a ceiling for biological nitrogen fixation? And then
sorry.
No, there you go.
Yeah, it's up there around that 250 to 350 mark at the moment from published literature, particularly for perennial legumes. It takes time to get the deep roots, and then they tend to be really effective at this pathway. For annual legumes, it's you're looking at around 75 to 150 in a good year. But yeah, the deep rooting legumes are the best.
So that's 75 to 150 of N, which, as we know, is less than half of urea. So you are looking at 150 to 300 kilos of urea, but we haven't factored in that efficiency losses. That's where we should like do some, just research in terms of, well, what's a good efficiency loss to be using with? Because if 300 kilograms of urea equivalent at a 1/3 efficiency loss is 450 kilos, half a ton per hectare
Yeah.
of
sure there's
urea. It's 800, nearly $1,000 a hectare.
I'm sure there's great data out there on sort of weather and environmentally mediated results.
Good point. So, Cadel, outstanding work. Do we want, like, I'm super pumped in terms of the prospects of this, and I think if there are any producers or growers who are interested in measuring their BNF, biological nitrogen fixation rates, can we set up like some kind of like EOI or a way to get in touch with us? We've put a link into the chat because we think this is, like I said, it's a world first, being able to digitally measure the amount of nitrogen being fixed by your soil. Now that's going to tell you like the value of the soil utility that's being provided. But I think there's much more. Like Hobbs, if you were looking at that like a map like that in terms of the relative strength of like what's performing, what's underperforming, what does that start to? Where does your head go then in terms of grazing management?
Oh, well, I mean, the question now is just like, how do we start to naturally encourage and optimize, particularly the legume composition in a pasture system? And you can always know where to add legumes, but I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, this is interesting. Number one, I want to see which areas are responding to what kind of management. Like we have our management data, we know what we've been doing, whether that's formally written down or a lot of people have it in their head. They still have the ability to kind of see what type of land responds to what type of management, and then it gives you the ability to start to think of, okay, this activity is causing more nitrogen, more nitrogen to be fixed. And nitrogen and carbon together, obviously, a great proxy, for overall landscape function. That's going to be super useful information. I want to know what time of year certain parts are expressing the most amount of prosperity in terms of nitrogen, in terms of carbon. And it's also not just the nitrogen, the fact that we're going to be able to toggle back and forth between nitrogen and carbon, and just to see the relationship between those two and how that whole flow is moving is going to be fast. I mean, I'm looking at this particular map right there, and the bottom right, it looks like the nitrogen fixation is slowing. The BNF is slowing down. I would be willing to bet there was a lot of heavy grazing around the time of this satellite was taken in that bottom right corner. So that, okay, and how fast does that nitrogen fixation come back on as the grazing moves across the property? These are all questions that are going to emerge as we begin to excavate and grapple with this data.
Yeah. Awesome. Cadel, any last comments?
The only final comment is reach out with any feedback you have. If this makes sense to you or if it seems completely useless, that's the sort of information we want to know. So feel free to email us, come through our website, and as Matthew said, if there's a kind of EOI form that we can spin up, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Excellent. Let me just check.
Cadel, do you feel like your mission when you started Jora is coming into fruition as you continue walking down this path?
My mission was to see farmers paid, and that's happening. So that was an easy win, Hobbs.
Outstanding. Well, thank you, Cadel. That's great. Outstanding work. I think we're going to get you back on, if you're up to it, back on more and later episodes of Grazing Horizons. And actually, I think Hobbs is like, now we know what Cadel and the team's capable of. I mean, like we should think about some.
Now.
Yeah, that's right.
Some more challenges.
Yeah, so you better be careful what YouTube channels you look at. Let's just jump back in and take a quick break. in proceedings, just to mention a word from our marketplace partners. So AgriProve is a commercial organization. We work with a variety of partners to help improve soil function and utility, getting that soil strength happening across many outstanding organizations. So I do want to mention Lorico, one of our marketplace partners. And if you are rebuilding your pasture system from the ground up or trying to accelerate the soil biology we've been talking about today, Lorico's approach is certainly one of the most comprehensive programs we've come across for doing that at the farm level. So they work across 6 areas of soil carbon regeneration: mineral balance, microbial balance, biological inoculants, biological nutrition, residue management, and carbon balance. And what makes them the right partner for this kind of conversation is that they're not selling inputs to replace inputs. The whole model is about building the biological system, building that soil strength so that inputs become progressively less necessary, which is exactly the direction we're talking about today. You'll find Lorico through the AgriProve marketplace. There's a link in the chat. And Hobbs, I think we're going to go back to you to do some spin on more implications of biological nitrogen fixing and grazing management.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, okay, so you've got legumes sitting. Legumes super important, obviously. It was showing what 85-90% in that particular example was showing where the BNF was coming from. The rest of it was sort of free floating bacteria hanging out in the soil. Diazotrophs. So the question is, how do we feed all of those legumes? How do we feed all of those diazotrophs? And the question is, what do they eat? They eat light. So we want to optimize the energy capturing capability of those plants. So imagine that there are 2 pathways. Imagine that you're a clover. So you want to have maximum leaf area. So you're capturing maximum photons, and you are therefore fixing maximum nitrogen. That's awesome. The other way is let's look at grass. We have some grass. We want to have maximum leaf area on that grass so it can kick out maximum root exudates and slough off maximum amount of root cells, which feed microbes, diazotrophs. So the goal is, how do we get those photons most effectively into the areas where they're going to create carbon and create nitrogen? And so how do we optimize our solar panel for maximum efficiency? We do that by moving towards higher density and higher harvest efficiency grazing. There are still, and there will be for a long time, lots and lots of people teaching take half, leave half. Take half, leave half comes from a guy called Frieder in 1955 at the University of Missouri, who worked in the nursery department, who took potted plants and scissors and showed that if you take a young plant and cut it and graze it at 50% with the scissors, the roots stop growing. It's like, okay, that's cool, but it has nothing to do with a naturally occurring system of established plants, right? So what we are talking about now is, if you want maximum carbon and maximum nitrogen fixation over the longest period of time, you need to have uniform severe grazing followed by appropriate rest. Now, how that actually starts to work is different depending on where you are. If you are in Montana, in the mountains of Montana, which none of you are, you can do a long rest rotation where the forage is such great quality that you can graze it densely and severely and then wait 18 months, come back and do it again, and give 18 months for those plants to put the carbon in the ground, for those plants to fix the nitrogen, making it available. So the question then becomes, okay, well, my forage falls apart really quickly when it goes past the vegetative stage and it goes into the really mature stage. So what do I do with that? Well, that's where we start to get into the 3-zone adaptive grazing. And could you go back? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. So this is perfect. This is the 3-zone adaptive grazing, which It's taught by Jaime Elizondo. It's advocated by Johann Zietzmann. This is the way to get around the fact that we need to keep cattle in good body condition with vegetative, nice, nutritious, high protein, low fiber forage. But we also need growing, mature, effective, amazing solar panels to put carbon and nitrogen in the soil and to really grow that biological machinery. Because the vast majority of the world's cattle exist on fresh regrowth. So no biological machinery is being built. People are just moving their cows around, chasing that little bit of fresh green pick that pops up, and we wonder why our soil is completely falling apart. So in the 3-zone adaptive grazing, take your farm, and by the way, this is obviously oversimplified. Take your farm, split it into 3. The first zone is the green zone. That's where you are chasing the nice, perfect, green, vegetative, high-protein grass. Graze as densely and as severely as the genetics of your cattle can handle, and move frequently and harvest efficiently. And leave the other 2/3 alone. If you have a bad year, get into the middle section. The forage may be a bit more mature, provide some protein supplement. And then the stockpile, that's the buffer section. Then the stockpile section is what you generally get into during your non-growing season. In certain areas, that's during the winter. Here, that's probably the summer. So most people are feeding out and containment feeding across the summer because they have no stockpile. And they will say, well, we can't keep the cattle in good condition, or we don't want it to burn up. And okay, that's fine, but it's also thermodynamically suboptimal. So you provide protein supplement during that time, and protein supplement on stockpile with genetically adapted cattle is cheaper than feeding hay or feeding in containment area. So this obviously becomes a labor issue, which we will get into on the next slide. If there are any questions, I would love to tackle them. Let me check to see if I see any questions. Matthew, do you have any questions? Any commentary? Any?
Why did you say it was too simple just to split it into 3 zones? And where do we pick as the first zone? So if we're looking, I think we've got maps now that we show our carbon strength. We show our nitrogen strength. Do you start with your green zone in those strongest areas? Is that where you'd go?
I would have an even mix of each in
Neapolitan style.
Yep, exactly. That's great. I'm going to use that, Neapolitan. So Neapolitan in zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3, because then it gives you the ability to evenly distribute those different types of energy flows across because that's what we're talking about here, folks. This is energy flow. Everything is about energy flow. We are trying to maximize the amount of energy above the requirements to maintain life so that we can get growth and harvest. That is the goal. We can move on to the next one. I pretty much covered this one.
That's what it looks like. So then my next question goes to how much labor is involved?
Well, increasingly less with the advent of technology. So it appears that Halter is doing a great job creating a product that I'm not advocating for Halter, and they're not paying me. But from what I can tell, it appears that they're doing a great job solving the problems of labor. The other option is that you have to plan out effectively your semi-permanent infrastructure, which I advocate for high tensile wire, not putting up your grazing lanes every day and taking them down every day, which I did for 6 years. I don't recommend it. It's not good. It'll give you sciatica. I don't recommend it. So what we see here is the basic strip grazing setup with a Uruguayan gate. And this is how I ran for 6 years. You have one water. How do you take this paddock, this whole paddock, and turn it with only one water point and turn it into 100 paddocks? Well, you do it with grazing lanes, a water lane. Let's start at the bottom. You see the water lane extending across the bottom. That water lane is what gives the cattle access back to the water no matter where they are. The grazing lanes extend perpendicularly from the water lane. And then the Uruguayan gate is what lifts up the wire so they can walk under it. And effectively, you can use fence lifters to move the cattle multiple times a day. You might only want to move them once a day. That's fine. If you do that, make sure you do it when the sugar is highest in the forage, which is generally the afternoon.
So say that bit again.
The amount of sugar in the plant varies across the day. When it is as it has been receiving sunlight through the majority of the day, the sugars are the highest. And
so then in terms of the grazing or the movements,
you move the cattle into fresh forage when the sugar is at the highest.
Right.
It's called a Brix test. And so you can get a little lens out there and look at the grass, and it'll tell you how high the sugars are, and you identify at what time of day the sugars are the highest, and you move them if we're doing it once a day. So if you have, imagine this.
Sorry, label that point. So if you were wanting to just do a 1 move a day grazing system, you'd want to time that so that you're moving them onto that fresh pasture when the sugar levels is the highest.
Mm-hmm.
So the timing will then have a key determinant on the amount of energy that they're able to ingest.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. So so
you don't be on the wrong side of that.
Well, generally you'd get the most amount of gain if you're if you have an adapted cattle and you're moving them once a day, you're gonna do okay, but you get that extra bump if you move them and across 365 days, or say 250 days of growing season a year. That's going to be quite a lot. The sugars go back down into the roots at night, and there's much more produced in the leaf and living in the leaf when the sun's out.
I'm going to get Cadel to do that nitrogen modeling in terms of, does it change overnight?
That's right.
Or the sugars go back down into the soil, like what's happening down there with the diazotrophs. Quick question on nitrogen fixing. If you've just got a grass system and you're not planting legumes, where are we at then with BFN?
Well, it appears that you're probably 80 to 85% less biological nitrogen fixation than if you have legumes.
So so there's going to be a focus on legumes then as part of the system.
Right, and that's you can add legumes, but the most important thing is to give the land the energetic interference and cadence that it needs to encourage that to happen on its own. The land wants to seek a balance between the right amount of legumes and the right amount of grasses and broadleaves and brassicas. There is a natural balance that it is seeking, and you have to clear that palette, that canvas, at the optimal cadence in order for it to do that. And so I have seen on many places legumes appearing naturally because they're waiting for the right conditions and the right competitive conditions to arise.
Then it seems like that's a good segue onto this slide, which is that's nodulation there. So that's the nodules on the legumes.
Yeah, that's right. This is a AI created image here, but ultimately this is where we're headed and what we're going to be able to see. We're going to be able to, or what we did see on Cadel's presentation. We're going to be able to have all of that information available to us on a pixel basis, basically live. And that is your digital agronomist. That's Bruce, your digital agronomist.
Bruce. It's 5 months in Albury, and you know about Bruce. Outstanding.
Yeah. So ultimately, it's pasture grazing systems and cropping systems are two totally different worlds. You are much more likely to have an easier time transitioning off of synthetic nitrogen in a grazing system. It's going to be much easier. The pathway with cropping, it's a 3 to 7 year tough slog. But the question to ask yourself is, what's the cost of not doing it over the long term?
And just maybe just dwelling on that concept of balance, because one of the use cases I don't think we discussed with Cadel was that if you if you did have that map of where your soil nitrogen levels were at, and for whatever reason you were down on your BNF, you could actually focus a smaller amount of nitrogen application to a small amount of area.
Yeah, absolutely. Cadel, you want to jump in on that one?
Can actually, yep. I was waiting for a question, so thanks for throwing to me. The answer is yes. So the BNF pathway works up to a certain point with additional synthetic nitrogen. Then it hits this kind of cliff, after which there's too much synthetic nitrogen in the soil. It signals to the plants to conserve energy, and they stop biologically fixing nitrogen. But what the model can show you is exactly where that point is. So you can say, look, I've still got a lot of wiggle room here. And in fact, when you're kind of establishing new perennial legumes, it can be good to kind of pulse them with a little bit of synthetic nitrogen at the start until they grow enough for that BNF pipeline to take over.
So it's like my daughter, giving her just a few bucks a week to go to the canteen. But if I gave her too much, she would stop doing any extra chores around the house to
Yeah, who knew? It's
Well
all about
put.
balance.
It's so basically the soil is rational and responds to incentives.
All living systems want to conserve energy. It's the fundamental law of nature.
Oh, which one, Cadel?
Well, I mean, this is one of the things that Matthew and I were talking about earlier, and I think I flicked something over to you, which was that we want to conserve energy and we want to maximize the energy above maintenance per unit land area.
Hobbs, we're approaching the top of the hour.
Yeah.
This was the final slide. Was there anything you want to call out on here?
Oh, this is just an extremely well-designed high-density grazing property in Crescent City, Florida, that on extremely sandy soil raises soil carbon levels from sub 1% to 3.1% in 5 years with ultra-high density grazing.
So it works.
It works.
Excellent. I think that's a question in the Q&A around if we identify areas of low BNF, like what's the remedial action? What can we do to start to fix that?
Well, we'd have to see what's going on in that area. Are there what does it need? Does it need animal impact first and foremost? Is it just a lot of grass and we could meaningfully add legumes? We just need to look at that individually and it also depends on the landscape type.
So really the first benefit of this tool is showing you where to look, because I've been out on paddocks, dug and actually seen the nodules. It's amazing to see, but it's very hard to see from the top. And I think that's how you phrased it, Kate, like looking through the soil.
Yeah, we've now got the microscope, so we can start doing those experiments, is how I put it.
And then to find those areas in terms of, well, now where to look in terms of, well, what's working well and what's not. And then cross-checking that against your management records and starting to be able to figure it out. And in a way, this provides the documentation backdrop, or the record-keeping backdrop, in terms of how land is responding to your specific management.
Yeah, and that's increasingly too completely automated. Like the legume measurements in that demo I showed you are inferred from satellite imagery. So we're not asking you to go and fill out a bunch of forms if you don't have to. We can pull it kind of automatically.
Amazing. And can we get paid for it? Can we get paid for fixing nitrogen? I mean, it's kind of like a leading question to me.
Well, Matt, is there any other reason that somebody might, just because on top of this exciting opportunity with nitrogen, is there any other reason that right now would be a great time to get a soil sample to start with some sort of project?
Well, it would be a great time to start now, not only because of the importance of sovereignty in terms of taking back those controls, but also to ensure that we make a start with soil carbon projects. Now, the The challenge we have as carbon project developers is ensuring the access to carbon is really a right to revenue. So we've talking a lot about sovereignty, and we've identified uh, uh, um, aspects in the Middle East which disrupt those supply chains. And in a regulated market, there's a whole raft of other potential impacts that can come on board and impact that right to revenue, or that ability to access the soil carbon project. So the danger would be to say, oh, we can register and baseline a soil carbon project at any point in time. Now, at the moment, we can't get credits for soil organic nitrogen. I think that would be a great innovation. A lot of people would kind of go to something called the integrated farm and land management method, but you can't do that either in terms of fixing nitrogen. And there are real issues in terms of just which project you choose and how you set your project up to maximize those revenue streams. That's why we present AgriProve as the ideal partner to be able to do that.
So AgriProve protects people. Is
great to access. So I think we've got the fastest track to getting a soil carbon project registered. Now that's something actually we could maybe throw as an AgriProve challenge in terms of what is the fast track to getting a soil carbon project registered to get access to this technology. And we are maybe over-indexing on a whole raft of risks. But I can confirm, like, the soil carbon method is not about to be repealed by the Emissions Reduction Assurance Committee. There's no danger, I believe, in terms of that happening, as what happened with the grazing herd method. But at the same time, you cannot take it for granted that method will continue, and that ability to access a soil organic carbon project will continue. In fact, if we were going on to recent events in the carbon world, you might actually look at the newly announced Savannah fire management method, which is a great method, a great practice in terms of reducing fire management. But that change, that new method introduced into the carbon market was to introduce a sequestration bank. Now, how this operates in the fire method, so this is not how it operates in the soil carbon method. How it operates in the fire method is you get half of the carbon sequestered into the project delivered at the year of sequestration, and the balance delivered over time. So it gets essentially withheld, and then you get it over the next 25 years, or how many years are left in that project, as a risk mitigant in terms of reversal events that may happen to that stored carbon. Now, again, I'll be clear. There's nothing that's been put out that said you will lose half of your carbon from a soil carbon project as a result of these regulatory changes. So that is not what we are saying. We don't want to add a whole raft of potential concerned people in soil carbon projects. And also my experience now in being in carbon markets in Australia, first project to get carbon credits that I was involved in 2007. Makes me starting like an old timer. And there's a concept called grandfathering. So if you are in a soil carbon project today, you'll get grandfathered. So they cannot make those changes apply retrospectively to your project. So again, we're not wanting to try and create a controversy. We're not saying that the sequestration bank will apply to soil carbon projects. However, that is a risk that we've identified, and everyone should be looking at their own risk management across everything. Like, I mean, that's what Hormuz and Iran is certainly teaching me. I'm going through a whole bunch of risk aspects because risk is real. But the best defense for soil carbon is the best offense. And we often get asked, well, when's the best time to do a soil carbon baseline? And the best time to do a soil carbon baseline project is 5 years ago. The next best time is now. And AgriProve, if we don't have the fastest pathway to get a project registered, I think we could do some cross-checking and see, could we set up a fast-track pathway to getting soil carbon projects registered, so that there was no danger of getting squeezed out in terms of changes that may or may not. We do not know, but it is prudent to actually think about what's the best way to fast track a soil carbon project.
Is there anything that you have done personally or particularly recently to ensure or to advocate on behalf of the continued soil method the way it is?
AgriProve has contributed to the periodic review of the soil carbon method. Now, what that means is there's a process of reviewing the soil carbon method. We've provided a lot of detailed information showing how soil carbon works, how soil carbon sequestration is not a function of rainfall. It's actually a function of management. And now as we start to see our Horizon platform and starting to introduce these other features like biological nitrogen fixation and how land responds to management, even what we've talked about before, the concept of rainfall harvesting or effective rainfall, it is management that's a key driver in that. We have the data to show that. We've shared that with the government. We've participated with the Soil Carbon Industry Group, the big body for soil carbon, in terms of making sure that we are profiling this soil carbon method is the best soil carbon method that we have on the planet in a regulatory environment. Everyone should have supreme confidence in the results that method is driving. And we've also been fierce advocates to make sure that soil carbon stays as a standalone method and doesn't get caught up in emerging methods such as integrated farm and land management. Now, IFLM, integrated farm and land management, it is a great concept in terms of being able to do lots and lots of projects. But like anything with risk, the sting is in the tail and the detail. And certainly that method, which came out recently for consultation, had so much baggage in it. There were so many unintended consequences that I could never advocate for any producer or grower to sign up to an IFLM project. And I believe I have a high tolerance to bureaucracy and regulatory conditions because it had so many unintended consequences. Now, if you see and start joining the dots here, you might see where I'm going on this, Hobbs. But if you have a sequestration bank that's been introduced as part of that carbon landscape in another area
that you can't access,
that gets
it's not your bank,
not your bank, but you get it. Wouldn't that be great? Like, come and deposit with us, and we'll let you access those deposits over the next 25 years. You put that together then with what may come under the IFLM, Integrated Farm Land Management, and the consideration was just like, well, what would that do to incentives if you were to only get half of your carbon sequestration from your soil over the next 20, 25 years? Those kind of questions is the kind of stuff that we are actively engaged with what's called DECU, Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. And we see these are good people. Australia have got a great regulatory program, the Australian Carbon Credit Unit Scheme. This is us avoiding those unintended consequences. Such as the unintended consequences of bombing Iran is that you close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, maybe that was an intended consequence. Maybe that's something we should know. We should have known or foreseen. But this is all about avoiding those consequences and maximizing that optionality. And what we're seeing, the importance is that sovereignty and where does control of your system lie, and those rights to revenue. So now, just sort of thinking aloud, I think we should put up a fast track. We'll try and see whether we could do a fast track button, because the best way to mitigate against that upcoming uncertainty is to be in a program. And AgriProve stands with the producer, with the grower, in between the landholder and the government to bear the brunt and to be advocating in terms of any of those regulatory uncertainties. I mean, that's part of our value proposition.
So from the other perspective, another thing that I'm hearing you say is that right now we have shown that the soil carbon method, it works, and this is a great time to get in and do it because it works. It's validated. It's continuing to drive all kinds of innovation. People are earning credits. And every indication that it is a legitimate undertaking is there now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a great segue because now I've looked down and I blame you on this, Hobbs, because I said co-host. I didn't say host. I didn't say you could turn the tables and then start making me feel as like the guest because we've gone way over time. Thank you everyone for your patience and forbearance. But the key takeaways though from this Pod and R episode is we can measure soil organic nitrogen. We can measure biological nitrogen fixation. It is material in terms of that on top, stacking that benefit on top of soil organic carbon. And the key takeaway should be if you have been thinking about registering or participating in a soil carbon project, jump onto AgriProve and we will set a fast track that we will get you into a program sooner and more quickly than like any other organization. Awesome. Well, then it's over to me to do the final wraps. And at AgriProve, we believe soil is a superorganism. And when it functions as a living bioreactor, it provides the operating system for agriculture. Carbon is its emerging currency. I'd say carbon now, BNF, nitrogen is the emerging currency. Discussions like this help us move beyond data to understand stories, systems, decisions that lie beneath our feet. Ones that ultimately determine our collective sustainability, productivity, and profitability. This has been Grazing Horizons and AgriProve Pod&R. And if you'd like to get paid for increasing your natural capital, talk to the friendly team at AgriProve, where our state-of-the-art soil intelligence platform will help you see your soil like never before. You've been listening to co-host or host, Hobbs Magaret. Special guest, Cadel Watson, Head of Technology. Shout out and special thanks to Daniel Waltman getting out of hospital and coming in to help us out today. The producer and the team at AgriProve. My name is Matthew Warnken, and Horizon is only the beginning. Thank you.